Kristina, and I'm going to be refuting Sarah's claim that adolescents are incapable of meeting the mental requirements of being tried as adults. Her three claims of facts that she used to support her claim were: their brains are underdeveloped, their upbringing has caused them to act out in unruly ways, and society as a whole would be better off rehabilitating them rather than locking them up at a high cost to society. So this leads me to my major claim that adolescents should be tried as adults in certain circumstances. So my first claim, brain development and personality is developed at an early age. So actually using her evidence, according to Segalitz, the 3/3 of the brain volume is about 90% of its adult size by 6 years of age, and it reaches its adult size by the age of 12. So this actually supports my claim. It proves that adolescents are fully aware of the choices they make in life by the age of 12, scientifically by the age of 12. And with personality, I'm going to go with Freud's theories, his id, ego, and superego. So according to Freud, id is based on our pleasure principle. In other words, the id wants whatever feels good at the time with no consideration for the reality of the situation. And the ego is based on the reality principle. The ego understands that other people have needs and desires, and that sometimes being impulsive or selfish can hurt us in the long run. And the superego, that's basically like our right and wrong. It's the moral part of us, and it develops due to the moral and ethical restraints placed on us by our caregivers. And according to Freud, that's developed by the child, when the child is at the age of 5. And with her second claim, their upbringing has caused them to act out in unruly ways. Okay, my claim is that upbringing has no cause and effect in how a child chooses to act out. Perfect example being the Columbine High School massacre. So according to biography.com, Dylan Klebold was a child of the upper middle class, and parents considered gifted in grammar school. And Eric Harris was the son of an Air Force pilot. Okay, both of these adolescents, they grew up in a really good home. So they ended up killing 13 people and they wounded 20 people. And also my second example, Jordan Young. According to Stephanie Chen of CNN, Jordan Young was a chubby 5th grader with dark brown hair and an energetic smile. He liked riding bikes, reading Harry Potter books. He was basically like the all-American child, like the all-American boy. He ended up slaying his father's fiance, an 8-month-old fetus, and at the time of the killing, he was 11 years old. So her evidence about family conflict and violence has a heavy toll on adolescents, and that's why they act out. That's extremely false, because as you can see, as you heard, all these examples of these adolescents, they all grew up in upper middle class homes, and they acted out very bad. And my third claim, locking adolescents protects society as a whole. So basically, if adolescents are tried as adults, it's for a specific reason. And according to Lawrence Steinberg, he did an example. He did an experiment in which the New York side of the Hudson River, juveniles are tried as adults by the age of 13. So 85% were more likely to be arrested for violent crimes, 44% were more likely to be rearrested for felony property crimes, 26% were more likely to end up back in prison. So crimes among juveniles prosecuted in adult courts were more common and they were more serious. And these juveniles were rearrested more quickly, more often, and were more likely to be sent back to prison. And also, according to Ruhita Borker, it is believed that the juvenile court has been established with the age factor in mind rather than focusing basically on the crime factor. So many believe that this is a wrong approach to take up because it does not focus on the main factor at hand, the crime that has been committed. A crime is a crime. It doesn't depend how old you are. A crime is a crime, especially when it comes to murder. No one has the right to take anyone else's life. So it's said that the juvenile courts, they don't aim to punish. They're basically put in place to merely guide and to treat. So this really doesn't have a purpose because this in no way guarantees that no crimes will be committed henceforth. So in conclusion, juveniles should be tried as adults if the crime is violent enough. Thank you.
All right, you start off pretty effectively indicating the main and the secondary issues. That part's fine. You develop a counterclaim, and basically all of your supporting issues are going to be designed to support that counterclaim in the context of the argument that the advocate presented. But I'm not always sure that I get the contrast with that argument as clearly as I might. On the first point, that's where there was the clearest application of the advocate's evidence to the claim and your application of that evidence to the claim, and there's a little bit more analysis here. So you're talking about, for instance, brain development, and you talk about the advocate's own evidence suggesting that the brain's developed at age 12. I'm not sure that that's the inference that was being made there. In the long run, I guess that might be the case, that the brain is developed, but does the brain then, does brain development automatically produce the outcomes that you're talking about? Then you kind of got in this secondary issue demonstrating the concept of id, ego, and superego. I think that's an interesting approach to this, that there's a particular point at which kids have developed the characteristics which would allow them to distinguish their kinds of behaviors as fitting into these categories. Your proof on that seems a little bit conclusionary. The Freudian theory suggests that is true. First of all, that those distinguishing characteristics are true, and second, that it's established by the age of 5. Who am I to question Freud? But on the other hand, what's the basis for that particular conclusion? I think you need a little bit more information on that. On the second point, it seems to me like you were spending a lot of time refuting a premise that the advocate presented just because it's a premise that they presented, not because it's particularly important. I'm still not sure why the upbringing, one way or the other, is relevant to the issue of whether or not they should be tried as adults. I guess the argument here is that if it could change their behavior to try them as juveniles differently than treating them as adults, then we would get a different outcome. Maybe then your challenge on the whole Klebold-Harris thing or the Jordan Young example would make a little bit more sense. But I just thought that it was like automatic gainsaying for the advocate's point without explaining why that issue is particularly important. In the long run, it just sounds like, well, they've taken this position, so I'm going to take the opposite position. And I'm not sure either side has explained why this whole point is relevant to the issue. On the third point, you are getting a little bit into the value issue that I think is underpinning the advocate's claim also, and it really does come down to whether or not we're focusing on the actor rather than the act, and you're in essence saying that the function ought to be to focus on the act, that nobody has a right to murder. Then the question comes down to, are children capable of murder under the legal definitions, under the psychological definitions? And the one place that I got any argument about that was on the first point. If there's a different legal standard, for instance, then the premise of your argument is that legal standard is unreasonable or problematic, and I think that's where you need to go. All the stuff about what the different recidivism rates are, that needed to be a little bit clearer. I mean, I think it's relevant, but I'm not always sure why it's relevant. You've given me this. Okay, so what you're saying is that if they're juveniles and they repeat the crimes over and over again, then they deserve to be punished as adults. Or if they've been arrested, charged as adults, and then they commit the crimes again and again, then we were right in the first place to punish them as adults. It was not clear what the evidence ends up meaning there. I mean, I understand what a recidivism rate is, but I didn't understand whether that's a recidivism rate that's applying to juveniles or to juveniles who are charged as adults. And I didn't get a contrasting piece of information to tell me that there was a difference in the way that they are charged. So I'm not sure that I can reach the conclusion that you think is valid, that treating them based on the crime only is the only way of evaluating this. Audience contact's a little bit low. You need to work on that too. All right, thank you.